All right, good morning. The October 31st, 2024 meeting of the Transaction and Use Tax Oversight Committee is now called to order. Madam Executive Assistant, can you please call the roll to the time you call?
Liz Jones.
Present.
Heather Penko.
Present.
Rahuf Oyewole.
Present.
Let the record reflect all members are present.
Okay. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Chair Penko.
Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda today?
Doesn't look.
Seeing none, is there a motion or a second to approve the agenda?
I approve my motion to approve.
Committee Member Jones, approve?
And I will second the motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. All right. All right. Now is the time for administrative update. The Finance Director has the opportunity to provide community updates as well as department or committee announcement on current or upcoming projects. Mr. Finance Director, please.
Good morning, Chairperson Wally and committee members Jones and Penko. The update I have for you today as far as our administrative updates, staff will be working to update our budget in brief documents that we have online for the current fiscal year 24-25. We do have the prior year online for public review. Our goal is to maintain update that document, but also maintain a PDF of the existing document online as well. So we're working through that, and we're also working through completing our audit. So the numbers we'll be sharing with you are audited, but not final yet. But we expect to complete our audit financial statements and ACFR, which is our annual comprehensive financial report, hopefully in December. Second meeting in December, or most likely the second meeting in January. There will be no council meeting on the first Tuesday of January. Historically, that meeting has been canceled. So those are the administrative update I have for you today.
Okay, thank you for those updates. Any questions for Finance Director? All right. Now is the time for public comment. Any person may address the governing bodies on any subjects pertaining to city business. Normally, no action may be considered or taken by the governing bodies on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Madam Executive Assistant, are there any public comment, speaker?
We do not have any non-agenda public comments. Mr. Chair, that concludes public comments.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine and may be enacted by one motion and vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless specific items are removed from consent calendar for separate motions. Are there any requests from the committee to pull any consent calendar item for discussion?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, Madam Executive Assistant, are there any members of the public requesting to speak on consent calendar item?
We do not have any public comments. Mr. Chair, that concludes public comments.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a motion and a second to approve consent calendar?
Motion to approve consent
Okay.
calendar.
And
All
I'll
right.
make a motion to second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passed. Okay, so we now move to the discussion of items. Staff, may we have a staff report, please, on the transaction and use tax budgets to actual report for fiscal year 23-24.
Good morning again, Chairperson Wally and committee members Jones and Penco. The report that we have for you today is for the financial activities of the Measure T Fund through June 30, 2024. We start off with the revenues for the year. The adopted revenue budget for fiscal year 23-24, when this was adopted a couple years ago, as we have a biannual budget, was at $30.5 million. As of June 2024, the year-to-date amended budget is $28.5 million. Actual revenues stands at $28.2 million, which represents approximately 99% of the amended budget. As part of the revenue that we recorded this year, we have received a one-time transfer from the Corona State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. This is associated with the ARPA funds, or the ARPA Act. This is to cover costs associated with the California Oaks Sports Park Pool Replacement Project. This project was financed through both Measure T Fund, partially through Measure T Fund, and the ARPA Fund. However, due to the timeline that for committing and utilizing the funds in accordance with the ARPA guidelines, the project ultimately became ineligible for funding. So therefore, the reimbursement that we received from the ARPA fund is coming from the interest earnings, which are not subject to the ARPA guidelines. This is in essence to make Measure T whole for the cost, the initial cost associated with that project at the beginning. When we compare the revenue year over year, the sales tax revenue for fiscal year 2023-24 was slightly lower than the revenues for fiscal year 21-22, as well for fiscal year 22-23, with a decreases of approximately $269,000 and $311,000 respectively. The projected revenue for the current year, fiscal year 2024-25, we're going to estimate that approximately $29 million. This is reflecting an increase of approximately $851,000 or 3% compared to the actual revenues in fiscal year 23-24. Based on the city's sales tax consultant, they have forecasted a very modest statewide sales tax increase of approximately 1.7% for the upcoming year. However, in light of anticipated openings of a new big box retailer store this month, and there's a second big box retailer opening in December, we have adjusted the budget accordingly to incorporate those additional sales tax generations. And therefore, our forecast is a little bit higher than the statewide being forecasted by our city's sales tax consultant.
So what's that forecast? 1.7?
The state forecast by our city consultant is 1.7%.
May I ask a follow-up on that?
I'm sorry?
May I ask a follow-up to tag on to that? So the state projection is what they believe we will all take in as a result of increase of spending is 1.7?
Correct. So
Okay.
the city sales tax consultant forecasts statewide. They also forecast at citywide, primarily for our city. Ours is a little bit higher than the state.
Got it.
Primarily because we expect these two big box retailers to open very soon. Actually, one is already opened. And
Is
so
that the
we're
Home Depot and
at Ross and Home Depot.
Ross and Home Depot?
That's correct. And
So
we
how-
can
how much,
And we
though?
can share those now because it's now, it's been official.
Yeah.
And you guys probably can see it. As well.
Absolutely. So 1.7 forecasted for statewide, but we're thinking we're going to be what? Because of those two
About
retailers?
3%.
About 3, okay.
Yeah.
It's reasonable. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, in regards to our monthly average revenue, that is approximately $2.3 million, with significant spikes during the quarter and months. This is primarily attributed to a true-up collections from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administrations. And we have experienced those spikes year over year, but the average, when we account for all 12 months, it's approximately $2.3 million. Switching gear a little bit, going from revenue into our expenditures, summary of expenditures. The fiscal year 2023-24 amended operating expenditure budget is $28.1 million as of June 2024. The year-to-date expenditure as of the preparation of this report is approximately $23.3 million, or 83% of the amended budget. The percentage spent, if we exclude the capital improvement projects, for instance, then that equates to approximately 72.5% of the amended budget. And there was, and I know the committee had a couple of questions, which I will address at the end of the report, but one of the question is whether or not encumbrances are excluded or included. For the year-end report, we exclude encumbrances primarily because most of the encumbrances are canceled out or carry forward into the next year.
So they don't, so when you spend them, they don't typically get added back to the current year, to fiscal year 23-24?
When we spend the encumbrances, when the encumbrances are liquidated, so we record an expense, so the
Right.
expense gets recorded and the encumbrances is reduced. At year end, most of the encumbrances, if all services has been rendered, any remaining encumbrances are canceled out. If there are any encumbrances or purchase orders we have not received services yet, but it's planned to be received in the next fiscal year. So we carry that purchase order, we carry that encumbrance into the next fiscal year. The goal of the report today is to report to you only the expenditures that will align or will match the comprehensive annual financial reports. And that is only the expenditures that we report at year end.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Here's a summary of accomplishments utilizing Measure T fund. The Measure T has been a significant source of revenue that have really enhanced services for our community. During the semi-monthly reports, semi-annual reports that we bring forward to you, you're going to identify that some of these expenditures accomplishments are consistent year over year. And that's normally how we budget when there is contract services that we budget for. Normally we keep them within the same fund. However, if we look at our some of the accomplishments that we have as a result of Measure T, we have hired or increased our authorized position by 65. Since inception of the Measure T fund, 32 of which are public safety, police public safety positions, 14 are fire public safety positions, and 20 are non-public safety positions in various departments. Some of those positions are in the Community Services District, public works, but are also positions related to administrations and support, like in finance and payroll and HR, primarily because if we're hiring more people, we need more support in those areas. 74% of you,
I'm sorry, I apologize. I have a quick question on that.
yes.
The 65 positions, are those a small percentage of our fire, police, non-public safety, or is that the total department?
No, those are a small number of positions for each of those departments. Our city-wide authorized position is about 466 employees. We have approximately 116 sworn police officers. Here we have 32 being funded by Measure T.
And then a follow-up question to that. So of these positions, obviously, we fund to get them into payroll, or is that payroll then covered by the city, or does Measure T continue to pay those salaries perpetually?
That's correct, the latter. Yeah.
Okay.
Once we hire these positions and the revenue source is Measure T will continue to fund those positions until that position is eliminated.
And so would it be safe to say that the city has its own operating budget, and when we need a position that we can't fit in that budget, we then dip into the Measure T to do a new hire, as long as we have budget for that?
That's correct.
Okay.
And most of these positions is primarily to enhance services in
Sure.
those areas. So we have hire a lot of sworn officers primarily on the patrol side, and as well for the public safety, fire public safety positions.
Sure.
Primarily is to increase the number of positions in each of the 3 shifts that we have at the 5 fire stations.
Understand. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I think that was really the intent of this Measure T, to kind of enhance that public safety, right, the response time and such. And I think one of the, earlier meetings, one of the, I guess, a question or maybe a suggestion that I had made was that, is there a way that we could quantify the impact that these additional positions are making on response times on the public safety? So I don't know how I think the metrics for the public safety, you might have to work with the departments, but it is something that would be interesting for the public to see, that, you have this additional 65 position, or maybe 40, 46 in public safety, but they're making these differences, right? So, I mean, it's probably going to take a little bit of time to analyze what difference it's making, but, I think it'll be something that will be fascinating for people to see that, I mean, we were responding within, 5 minutes before, and now we cut that down to 4 because we were able to get these additional positions.
Yeah, our both public safety departments, they maintain really good records in terms to the number of calls for emergency. They do issue annual reports in terms of their operations. And so while we have those numbers, I think it will be difficult to quantify it primarily specifically for these positions, but the data is there in general overall in terms to the number of calls that they have received or responded, the number of emergency responses, the number of fires reported or reported. And so there is data. If we were to identify specifically these positions, it's probably something that we may have to work with them to see if we can start gathering the data separately for those specific positions.
I understand, and I'm not trying to give you additional work. I know you have a heavy load, but as Committee Member Jones is trying to point out here, so we have these positions. They're going to continuously be funded by Measure T, right? And then if we need more, that's kind of the point behind the Measure T when it was put on the ballot. It's like, we want to make sure public safety stays on track and we're able to respond. And so that was why I was asking for that.
Yeah.
So if I was evaluating this program, for example, I'd be looking at, okay, so fire department, when a call comes in, I'm able to get there in 10 minutes before, right? But now my response time has gone down to 8 because I get this extra support. Something like that. I mean, I think that's the way I would look at the evaluation, that it's actually making a difference.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about with respect to totality of the numbers available in terms of how many calls we respond to, but, are we making a difference with the additional position funded by Measure T?
Yeah, and certainly-
I think that's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly I'm happy to discuss this with both of our police chiefs. Certainly we can bring something back to you, primarily specifically some of these positions, programs that are being administered by them. One new program I can tell you is our drone program, something that we did not have before, and I will share more with you in the next few slides, and how Measure T has helped really funded some of these, how funded the drone program, and that of course require positions to be assigned to the program, and so certainly we can have that discussion with them, bring you back a report to you, how some of these new programs have been facilitated by the Measure T.
Yeah, and this could be on the list. It doesn't have to be, something on a priority, but on a long-term basis, it's just a way to substantiate, the difference that this funding is
Yes.
making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I go through this list, and again, you recognize some of these accomplishments because it's year over year, we continue to support those programs. But both police and fire have focused a lot of their Measure T funds in technology, really enhancing services, utilizing technology. So in the case of police, we have the taser and body-worn cameras that has been a game changer for our police department, primarily with liabilities and claims. But they continue to utilize the Measure T for other softwares as well, like the license plate reader software. And I know that we purchased another 20 new cameras this year for a total of 40 cameras around our city, which that system is also connected with the county and other cities, primarily to respond to any very specific vehicles that they're looking for. If our camera picks it up, it will send notifications to all the agencies where that vehicle actually drove by. So really focusing a lot on the technology. That includes the drone equipment. We probably have now around 7 drone equipments, different sizes, different purposes, which we have utilized for many different reasons. The last 2, I can tell you, we utilized it for the fires that we had in our city, but we also have utilized them to locate people at night, which makes safety a higher priority for our officers because they don't have to go into the brush. They know where the person is. And so had really make a big change. So we certainly can bring a report back to you with some of those programs.
Well, thank you.
On the fire side, some of the accomplishment we have reached with Measure T funds is establishing an agreement with CAL FIRE, a service agreement. This is for wildland fire protection. This really is a huge agreement that allow us, the city, that in case of a wildfire outside our city, CAL FIRE will come in and support the city efforts to put the fire away, primarily with airdrops. This service agreement includes that, which is a game changer for our fire department. Public Safety Enterprise Communication System, or the PSEC radio system, we have purchased some equipment that our fire department, I believe, is the first fire department that have joined that system. Now they're connected not only with the county, but they're also connected with all other police departments in the county as well. Personal protective equipment and safety equipment, 6 turnout gear. So these are the gears that our firefighters utilize them, primarily for new employees and or those that need to be replaced. We're also, again, they have utilized Measure T funds to improve, to utilize it for technology purposes and improve services, and that includes emergency software, such as tablet command, post point, CAD integration system. And lastly, funds have gone towards or being committed towards fire stations, facility maintenance, and major repairs. Primarily this year for Fire Station 5. Other departments and services that we have expanded, it includes our economic development efforts to continue to retain businesses, but also attract new businesses into our community. This includes efforts, as you may have seen, with Costco, the Ross, and thank you, Ross, and the second Home Depot. These are really efforts that takes years and year over year, have this communication with these businesses and help them with the plan, really advertise our city as a good place for them to establish a new site. Those are big decisions, and we're fortunate that we have a really great economic development department. Other supports that we have received is with Intergov system implementation. This is primarily to backfill positions when personnel are working on that implementation. This is to improve our permitting software for building permits and other permits. Measure T have assisted expand their graffiti and weed abatement services, traffic engineering. It also supporting our citywide vehicle lease program. And lastly, it continues to maintain the city's operating and sustainability reserve requirements. Something I forgot to mention earlier is that overall Measure T funds are 74% of Measure T funds are expended in public safety, which is that was the target, about 74%. So we're right at that number.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see what slides. This one here. I think it's this one here. Okay, so this, let's see, 10.6. So this slide, it's related to our capital improvement plan budget. The capital outlay expenditures typically consist of one-time purchases. If I go back really quick here to this slide here, the capital improvement projects, you see a $957,000 negative, although it may seem that this category was overspent during the calendar year or fiscal year. The city tracks the capital improvement plan, also known as a CAP budget, on a separate ledger to monitor the project budget from inception to end. Unlike the operating budget, which laps at the end of the fiscal year, the CAP ledger is maintained to ensure that the budget carries over in subsequent fiscal years until project completion. The budget allocated for CAP is that you shows here in the operating budget reflects primarily city council approvals through the fiscal year for new projects, as well as for projects that were established in prior year and which include related encumbrances that we're carrying forward into the subsequent years. So all CIP-related expenses, although we maintain a separate ledger for it, all expenses hit our general ledger operating budget as well, because that is our source of information data to compile our financial statements. So that's why you see it here. And for transparency purposes, I have included it here. Historically, we have reported that as part of the overall capital improvement projects, which is at the bottom slide, which is the cumulative amount of the budget.
Okay. Can you go back to that for 1 minute, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think I was asking about that. So 10.6 is a cumulative citywide budget, right? Oh, okay. So the amount that relates to Measure T is the 1.3 above. Is that the budgeted number? But then the expenses is 2.271. The difference between the budget and the expenses is because we have encumbrances from prior year.
Correct, and there likely, there are expenses for budgets that were approved in prior year, but the budget doesn't carry over in our operating. Like I said, they remain in the ledger, we call it job ledger for CIP.
Okay.
And so there still shows as an expenditures in our general ledger, but the budget does not remain or carry forward year over year. If we carry our budget year over year in our operating, it would always show that we have more expenditures than revenues for this specific fund, for instance. And therefore, you see a negative of $957,000 there, again, primarily because these were expenditures that might be related to projects that were approved in prior years.
Okay, so then the second part of my question on this one is, so the CIP, the overall number, the 10.6 in the bottom, that's a separate, completely separate, maintained, right? Is it a separate fund? It's not in Measure T.
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of our CIP funded by Measure T are tracked and maintained in Measure T fund. So that's one of the reasons why we use a job ledger system, so that we're able to track the CIP within the same fund at the project level. So all expenses are maintained, budget and expenses are maintained within the Measure T fund.
Okay, but not the whole 10.6 though, right?
The
Because
10
that's
points,
not all funded by Measure T.
the 10.6 is all funded by Measure T. Yes.
Okay, but
That's
from
correct.
prior, but it's cumulative.
Cumulative number 10.6, 4.5 is
Actual.
year-to-date inception for all projects. So that includes current and prior year expenses, and the balance is what's remaining for all those projects.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And just to clarify, the balance will remain in the CIP budget and carry over to the following year?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now, it's always a balance that changes as we add projects. So both the amended budget will increase, and of course the balance will be larger because we just added in new projects. As we spend on those projects, then the balances will start going down.
Okay.
So it's always there's always a fluctuations on those balances.
Yeah, because you're adding and some are being completed and such.
And some other
Okay.
completed, correct.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, so as I shared with you and the prior slide, so we had approximately $10.6 million in Measure T funds that have been allocated to the CAP budget. Cumulative expenditures for all of the CAP projects amounts to approximately $4.5 million, which represent 43% of the budget. That leaves approximately $6.1 million available in those CAP budgets. It's really important to note that CAP budget expenditures and remaining balances will fluctuate throughout the year due to new budget commitments for existing projects, newly approved initiatives, and completed ongoing projects. Here's a list of the most notable projects completed or substantially completed throughout fiscal year 2023-24. For instance, CAP 10042, this is the library bin sorter. The automated book bin sorter machine was completed in August of 23. The project replaces the existing system at the Murrieta Public Library, really streamlining the handling of approximately 20,000 books per month.
Wow.
This has been really a lot of game change. It's a game changer for our staff at library. save them a lot of time to sort those books and what they needs to be put back. CAP 21023, 21024, this is the roof project, involved a replacement and repair of a 15-year-old roof, addressing visible wear and leakage issues. Also, the HVAC system project was upgraded, the 15-year-old control system, so that we can enhance operational efficiency and achieve energy savings within our library department. 21035, it's our project. It's our police department admin office improvement. This project really focuses on optimizing the existing space to improve ergonomics for our staff members, but it also addresses the number of new positions that have been added to our police department. 21040, it's another significant project that have been completed, substantially completed during the year. This project aimed to create a workspace for current and future employees with the capacity to accommodate up to 21 new staff members. This list represent those ongoing projects or active projects that we have in CAP. The most notable projects is 10046. This project involves replacing approximately 72 self-contained breathing apparatus. This is for our fire department to ensure compliance with the state, as the current manufacturer have discontinued the existing equipment. So in essence, we're almost required to replace them because the existing equipment or the vendors no longer providing support for those equipment. 21019, Fire Station 1 sewer and concrete replacement. The proposed project includes replacing the driveway and facility pavement to meet the acceptable pavement condition standards capable of supporting the weight of the existing fire apparatus. Additionally, the project entails the removal of the current septic system tank and installation and connection to the sewer lines to the local municipality sewer utility. So that was our first fire station. Believe it or not, it was still on septic tank. Another project I wanted to talk a little bit about is the 21022. This project is the Police Department Mobile Command Center, which will focus on the acquisition of this, I would say it's almost like a motorhome. And it would, this will assist or serve as a backup to the Emergency Operations Center in case of emergencies, and will enhance the city's capacity to coordinate essential services during emergency responses, including citywide events and EOC activations. And lastly, 21037, this project includes improvement to Fire Station 1, specifically the renovation of existing dorms, rooms, and restrooms. With an increase in suppression staff, these renovations are necessary to accommodate the additional personnel. Yes.
Quick question, in just scanning through these, do most of these projects fall under prevailing wage?
Yes.
To make that, okay.
That's correct. Okay, operating reserves and sustainability reserve. The City Council formal policy mandates that operating reserves be maintained at 25% of the adopted operating budget. The Measure T operating reserve balance of $4.9 million as of the end of fiscal year 23-24 aligns with the reserve policy. During the fiscal year 23-24, Measure T fund allocated approximately net $13.8 million to various sustainability reserves. These reserves are designated for specific items, including, for instance, for the fire fleet replacement, includes the purchase of a tiller truck, fire truck, estimated at $2.4 million. It also includes a Type 1 fire truck at approximately 1.4, and these are, the tiller it's a new equipment, but the Type 1 will be a replacement of an existing fire truck, which is approximately over 20 years old. It also includes on the fire repair of facilities, fire facilities reserve, Fire Station 1 rehabilitation of $3.4 million. But also there is a need for rehabilitation for Fire Station 2 and 3. We do not have those amounts, but those are to be determined in the future. We also have put funds or reserves for costs or primarily for the increase in pensions liability for all of our employees. So we have set a pension 115 trust and set aside $6 million. And also another trust for the other post-employment benefit, which is another benefit and which obligation have increased over the years, and we're setting aside $1 million.
So the OPEB set aside, that's for the future, right? It's not like a liability that you wanted to contribute towards now.
Yeah, so in essence, the trust we're setting aside is primarily to help, is almost like a rate stabilization. That is, if our OPEB expenditures increase significantly over the next
And you tap
years,
that.
we can tap into this to offset that cost increase.
Okay.
Same for the pension rate. As I shared with you, staff is working, administrative update, staff is working on updating the Measure T monthly budget to actually, the Measure T brochure. We're be working on the monthly budget to actual reports to you that we have postponed during the last few months, primarily to prepare this report. And our next meeting will be in March of 25. This report, as well as the prior reports, all can be found in our city's website. We have a dedicated website primarily for Measure T. The recommended action for you today is to receive and file the district sales and use tax history report, budget to actual for fiscal year 23-24, and this is through financial activities through June 2024. And before I turn it over to you, I know committee have spent some good time reviewing the report, and you guys share with some questions you guys had during the last few days. I'm happy to share those questions and responses to ensure that I'm able to address all of the questions that you have, and I'm happy to take any other questions that you may have as well. One of the questions you had was that the May monthly report had a $28.5 million of amended budget. The final report has it at 28.502, and you asked what's the difference. So in the prior months, as part of our budget, we have a sales tax, get my notes here, a sales tax abatement agreement. This is primarily with a auto dealer came into our city, covering the sales tax abatement agreement. It covers both the regular sales tax that Bradley burns, but also the transaction and use tax, which is Measure T. These tax abatements recorded on a quarterly basis, and therefore that's one of the reasons why they didn't report it to you monthly, because we record that abatement on a quarterly basis. However, I will go ahead and start including both of them moving forward, even though there is no activities in that budget. We'll start reporting those to you on a monthly basis. In regards to the process of modifying the budget numbers during the fiscal year, establishing a new appropriation or budget using an assigned or available fund balance requires City Council approval. This can be accomplished through the quarterly budget update that I give council, but also it can be done on as part of an agenda report to council, primarily for those that requires a fiscal impact to increase in appropriation. This typically could be awarding a contract for services or contracts, and at that point, council can authorize the increase in the budget.
Okay.
Other question you had was on what is the revenue source for the transfer in of the $239,000. I shared a little bit about that. This is related to the one-time transfer from the coronavirus fund. This is designated for costs associated with the California Oaks Sports Pool Replacement Project. So this is a reimbursement, one-time reimbursement back to the Measure T fund. Okay. Operating budget table on page 18, the capital improvement project line item of $1.3 million of that table. Is this amount part of the 10.6? The response there is yes. The amount of the 1.3 is included in the cumulative capital improvement plan budget of the 10.6 million. This cumulative total number comprises allocation from both prior and current fiscal year allocations. Historically, we have reported this information as part of both tables at the year-end report.
Okay.
Our CAP budget allocation maintained the same fund or separate fund. Yes, CAP budget and expenditures are tracked and maintained within the Measure T fund using the job ledger accounting system.
Okay.
How do we treat or allocate any remaining balances in incompleted projects? Open project completion, any remaining balances is reallocated back to unassigned or available fund balance for future use. And that future use requires city council approval.
All right.
This is a multi-part question. How are contributions to reserve reflected in the operating budget? Are they in the transfer line? And I'm just going to go a little bit down to the latter part of the question. It says also, please explain the process of recording surpluses between actual revenues and expenses. In other words, do surpluses in any given year automatically flow into reserves or allocated, recorded in some other way? Mm-hmm. So surpluses in any given year do not automatically transfer to the reserves. Instead, they increase the unassigned or available fund balance. Staff recommends committing portion of this unassigned fund balance to the operating or sustainability reserve during the fiscal year and report to City Council. In line with the city reserve policy or when there is other operational needs. All reserves are presented on the balance sheet of the Measure T fund as committed in accordance with GASB 45. So this is an accounting pronouncement that we have to follow. So when there's a surplus, it's available, then we can make recommendation to council whether we put that into reserve or we put that into some CAP projects. And then once they take action, then we commit within the same fund balance, we commit those from unassigned into committed fund balance. And therefore, they cannot be used for any other purposes except for what has been approved by council.
Okay, so can you go and use this year's as an example? You know, go back and just kind of explain to me how that's going to work.
Yep.
Please. So this year, I mean, fiscal year 23-24.
So our revenues were 28.2.
Oh, 0.2 is the actual, yes.
Total revenues, actual revenues, and our expenditures is 23.3. So let's say we have approximately $5 million in surplus. Mm-hmm. So we make, when we bring the year-end report, we show council, we ended up the year with the $5 million surplus. Mm-hmm. We're recommending, if we are required to maintain the 25%, then we need to allocate part of that into the reserve operating. If there is a need to set money aside for future equipment purchase, then we make a recommendation to put it into the fleet reserve. And so once they make a decision and approve that decision, let's say they recommend $3 million out of the 5 to go into the reserve, then we reduce an assigned fund balance by the $3 million and increase reserve by the $3 million. And one more question, footnote 3 on expenses.
I'm sorry, before you go to that, I think there might be a couple more in here, right? And that's 7. Okay, let's see, what do I have? The transfers. Yeah, that part there, the earlier part. So if we're looking at that operating table, those reserve amounts that we budgeted, are they part of?
No. part of the operating budget. No, we do not budget reserve contributions.
Okay, so the contribution that were made from earlier amounts, like fiscal year 22, 23?
Correct. So contribution that we
where's
have.
that money from? I guess it's money.
Contribution that we have, going back here from the past.
Yeah, so this 14.3
Yeah, these 14.3, that's coming from,
earlier.
that comes from earlier contributions. That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so it's previous year's funding that was. Okay.
Previous year's available fund balance.
All right, so the 5 million that we just discussed, that would, the next fiscal year, you would contribute out of that based on council's approval and such?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha, okay. Is there anything else in that part, questions that, okay, so then that 13.8 or 14.1, whatever that number is, we've already contributed that's in there. That's going to be in there. Okay. All right. I think that's, okay, yeah. Thank you. That's good.
Welcome. And the last question from the committee is, there's a footnote 3 on expense and the expenses table. And the question is, do these expenses amounts include or exclude encumbrances? For year-end report, encumbrances are excluded. So the footnote on page 21 is incorrect. It should say it excludes encumbrances, not include.
Okay.
I believe those are all the questions I received from the committee. I appreciate your thorough review and the questions. I'm happy to answer any other questions. With that, conclude today's presentation.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Are there any questions for the?
No, I don't have any
Additional
questions. That was very thorough. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain some of those. We're still finding our way through getting comfortable with how the report's laid out and the flow of funding. So I appreciate the time and effort taken to respond to that.
You're very welcome.
Madam Executive Assistant, are there any public comments regarding this discussion item?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comments.
All right. Thank you, staff. These was a receive and file item, so no further actions needed. So now is the time for any additional comments from committee members.
Just thank you for your work. There's a lot of detail here to your staff.
Yep. All right.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to be so detailed for us.
All right, and I echo that. I know it's a lot of work because I'm in it for the city of Los Angeles. So I know what goes into it, and I just wanted to thank you and staff for taking the time to put the community reports together for us and answering our questions. Also, I was looking through the website and I saw the accomplishment listing that the city manager put together for fiscal year 23-24. I just want to congratulate your department. Finance department for some of the things that are on there, the award for budget and the financial reporting. All of those are things that I strive to get to in my job on a consistent basis. It takes a lot of work to maintain the consistency, to make sure you're complying with standards all the time. So I wanted to kind of mention that. We saw that, and I want to congratulate staff on those accomplishments. So I know the audit is still ongoing, so good luck with that. And then appreciate modifying that information on the website, that brief that you put together for us. That was pretty nice. Let's update that once the audit is final with final fiscal year 23-24 numbers, right? The only other comment I was going to have has to do with fiscal year 24-25. And you kind of addressed that already. I know we initially had 31.4 as the revenue expected or projected, but you've kind of knocked that down a little based on the projections and expectation. That's consistent with what we're saying too, around 1 to 1.5. Things are pretty consistent right now, economy-wise, macroeconomy, but it's still pretty tight for folks, especially folks on the lower end, and that's what the numbers are showing. So We're probably going to slug it out for the rest of the fiscal year. We don't know what's going to happen after the election. But that's a pretty reasonable projections. I think that's 28. It looks like we've been flat 28 for the last 3 fiscal years as we look at the numbers. So 29 is reasonable with the 2 retailers coming in. So I think that's pretty awesome job. So appreciate the efforts, and that's all the comments that I have. Thank you so much. With that, without any further business, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much.